All right, our speaker's a good man. Well, I want to thank Rod Sherman. Kind of prompted me to look into it, and after I Googled Alvin, this guy has got a great history. A lot of great books. I think he's written, what, about 5 books now? 4 books?
That's number 4.
That's more than Kirk's ever read in his life. So, you know, this is good. But we've had a couple of people here who have already read the book, and they said it's one of the best books they've ever read, Defiant. And it's back here for sale. Alvin will sign it or put a little more memento in the back of it for you. Like I said, he's a Atlanta-born person. He went to Washington Lee, probably couldn't get into Alabama, so he went up there. But otherwise, this guy is just unique. I think I'm going to give him more time to talk, but again, give a hearty welcome to Alvin for us.
And for the folks in the Marine Corps, there's also a picture book in the back, if y'all want to look at that. Now, in all my travels and all my speaking, I've learned you can always get a good laugh by throwing the Corps under the bus. So the Marine, or Auburn folks. So the Marines and the audience, thank you for many laughs along the book tour. My father-in-law is here. And as Dave said, he gave his daughter's hand to me in marriage 2 weeks ago, and he did that with his right hand. With his left hand, he reached into her pocket and took back his credit card. So we need lots of book sales today. So buy some books afterwards, please. Anyway, Defiant came out in February, and we had John McCain and Jimmy Carter and the New York Times, everybody behind us. We had a wonderful release. And it has been an amazing 3 months, traveling around the country and seeing people react to this story and react to the story of veterans. And everyone, I think, puts the POWs up on pedestals to some degree. But I think people like me and everyone in my generation puts all the veterans up on pedestals. And the POWs, to a one, will tell you the real heroes were the guys down in the South who were in the woods getting shot at with bullets instead of just getting worked over by some interrogators. And so when I talk about the POWs, when I talk about the values that they represent, I'm really talking about the values that everyone here in this room represents. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about this. So to start out, I want everyone to imagine for a second, this is going to be hard for some of you, that you are a naval aviator, which means you are cocky, you are confident, you're relatively well-schooled. You fly supersonic aircraft that you think you can control. You think that you can strap on this Mach 2 fighter and can control something that's basically uncontrollable. You also think that you're absolutely invincible, and you think that you're the finest fighter pilot in the world because you are a naval aviator. And I know the Air Force guys would disagree. Those of you that know naval aviators understand what I'm talking about. So, July of 1965, you're deployed off the coast of North Vietnam. You're commanding a fighter squadron. You're about to get command of that fighter squadron in 2 more days. Your name is Commander Jeremiah Denton from the state of Alabama, educated at the U.S. Naval Academy, graduated with Jim Stockdale and Jimmy Carter. You have 7 kids at home and a wife. And again, you're a cocky American naval aviator, so you think there's no way anyone is going to shoot you down, let alone somebody using antiquated artillery, wearing sandals, in a country like North Vietnam. Well, you're in a diving run in North Vietnam. All of a sudden, your plane shakes and shudders. There's an explosion in your left wing. Plane starts spinning. You realize you're not coming back from this thing. So you wait till the plane's upright for a second. You tell your WSO to punch out. You punch out, and all of a sudden, all that invincibility, all that ego, all that confidence has been shattered, and you're floating down into a river in North Vietnam. Your legs busted, shoulders hurt, and you're trying to stay afloat in this river, and some North Vietnamese soldiers grab you, they pull you to the shore, and they start kicking you. And you realize all those things you had, all your rank, all your status, all your competence, the wardroom, the ready room, an aircraft carrier, all that was gone. All you had left was your name, your honor, and your will to survive. And you knew that the next couple months were going to be really bad. But you knew that you had to have the strength to get through that because you were a senior officer. So not only did you have to get yourself through that, you had to get every other American that was a POW through the same thing. So you knew that you weren't going to have the strength just to be unbreakable, just to get through this thing. You were going to have the strength to be defiant. Now, after you reflected about this for a couple minutes, you thought, well, maybe it's not going to be that bad because look, this is, July 1965. We've only been in this mess for a couple months in terms of the air war. Started in March or February of 1965. So you thought, surely this is the United States of America. You know what? My country is going to get me out of this. I'll be home by Christmas. Well, Christmas of 1965 comes. And there you are, still in Hanoi. Christmas of 1966 comes and goes. 1967, 1968, 1969. America starts drawing down its troops. And every day, your captors are coming to your cell and telling you, see, we told you. We told you America was going to leave you, and that's what they're doing. You are going to die in this prison. 1970, 1971, 1972. POWs did not come home until February of 1973, up to 8.5 years as POWs, never knowing if they were going to come home or not. It's almost like an unending mission out into the jungle. You don't know if you're going to come back or not. But Jeremiah Denton and all of these other POWs started their ordeal in this place called Wallow Prison. It got the nickname in April of 1965 as the Hanoi Hilton. This is a big French prison built in the late 1800s to hold Vietnamese colonial prisoners. And when the American POWs walked in there, they had never seen anywhere so filthy and so dirty, and that echoed just with the screams of misery from the past 70 years. It was an awful place, thick walls. And immediately the North Vietnamese began to separate the prisoners because they knew that united prisoners were prisoners that could communicate with each other and prisoners that could resist. And the Vietnamese planned to win this war with propaganda. And the propaganda instruments were going to be the POWs. So they had to try and keep these guys separated and where they couldn't communicate with one another. So as a POW, you realize your first responsibility is to communicate with your other buddies. So you all can, in some way resist this propaganda program. So they developed the TAP code, and I expect most of the people here have heard about the TAP code at some point, but it's called the Smitty-Harris TAP code. And one Air Force guy happened to remember overhearing a coffee break conversation with a Korea War POW, and this gentleman explained the TAP code. So basically what it is there are 26 letters in the alphabet. You take away K, so now you have 25 letters. You're going to use C for K. So you arrange these 25 letters in a 5x5 matrix. And so so across the top it's A, B, C, D, E, and down the side it's A, F, L, Q, V. So to communicate the letter B, you tap once for the row and twice for the column. These guys sounded like a bunch of woodpeckers because they would just tap walls, they would sweep and code, they would do anything they could in code to talk to their fellow POWs. And you may think it's kind of crazy because you're thinking, how can they communicate sentences or anything substantial using a TAP code that complicated? Well, they didn't have anything else to do. They were locked in these cells wondering when they were ever going to come home. And so, but to make things a little more expedient, they did come up with some abbreviations. And my generation likes to think that we were the ones that pioneered abbreviated text messaging. No. These POWs were using TM for tomorrow, GN for good night, long before we were ever even thought of. And so they had this incredible communication network that went throughout the prison. And one of the things they communicated was the value of the code of conduct. The way they had thought they were fighting the war and the way they ended up fighting the war were completely different. But the same rules of honor still applied. And under the military code of conduct, the only thing they were allowed to give up to their captors was their name, their rank, their service number, and their date of birth. They were to say nothing that was harmful to the United States, nothing that was disloyal to the country or their fellow POWs. That was all they had left. Remember, they didn't have anything else. They were in pajamas. They got 2 meals a day of soup. They were injured. So all they had was that code of conduct to uphold. And so Jeremiah Denton and Jim Stockdale and Robbie Reisner and a group of amazing leaders came up with one simple goal, and that was to return with honor. And they knew they could take that simple goal and communicate it, and that every serviceman in the Hanoi Hilton would know that when he was by himself in a cell or in an interrogation room, he would understand what returning with honor meant to him. And basically it came down to you being able to come home at some point, because you didn't know when you were going to come home. But you had to have faith that you would. And on that day you did come home, you wanted to be able to stand up tall in front of your family, your countrymen, and the man you saw looking back at you in the mirror. So for a while it was pretty easy. The Americans just wouldn't give up any intelligence. They wouldn't give up their name, anything more than their name, rank, service number, date of birth. After a while, the North Vietnamese kind of got tired of this, and they needed some better propaganda. So they tried to be a little more persuasive with the POWs. So I hope you're still imagining that you're Jeremiah Denton. Remember, you're a stubborn, slightly obnoxious naval aviator who has nothing left except his honor. So they ask you, Commander Denton, you need to sign this confession. We're not playing around anymore. Sign this confession. And you say, no, I'm not going to sign the confession. They say, look, it's going to get bad. We don't want this to get bad. We want this to be easy. We want to give you good food. We want to treat you well. Just cooperate. Oh, you're not going to cooperate. So they say, all right. So I want everyone to scoot forward in your chairs just a little bit. Kind of scoot to the edge of your chairs if you have the room. And if you can, stick your legs out in front of you kind of straight. Pretend your legs are on a concrete floor with leg irons around your ankles. And now put your hands behind your back. Pretend they're manacles on your wrist. They say, come on, sign this confession. Don't make us hurt you. We don't want to hurt you. We want to be nice. Yeah, you're a stubborn American aviator who has nothing except his honor left, so you say, no, I'm not going to do it. Are anyone's elbows touching right now? No, right? So a guy named Pig Eye, he's about this big, about 40 years old, kind of stocky. Pig Eye walks in the room. He has some ropes. So he starts to lace up your arms with ropes. And he starts to pull them tighter until your elbows touch. Your sternum's about to split. Your shoulders are about to pop out of their socket. You can't believe that you can handle this much pain, and you almost can't, but you can still hold on a little bit. So they say, Denton, sign the confession. We're not going to tell anybody. Your country's never going to know. Your other POWs aren't going to know. Just sign it. It's going to get really bad. But you know what? You'll know. You'll know that you gave in. And you know that it's not just a one incident thing. It's a path. Because if you do that one confession, you're going to do more confessions. You're going to go down a path where you're going to lose your honor. So, all right, arms behind your back again. Now pretend somebody's back there. They're going to grab your wrist, and they're going to push your arms over your head and drive your nose to your knees. And you have never felt pain like that, and so you break. You sign the confession. And you go back to your cell thinking that you're the only American in all of Hanoi that couldn't hold out. You think you were weak. You broke. You dishonored yourself and your family and your branch of service. You might be crying. You're certainly hurt. You get back to your cell, you lay down, you curl up on a little mat, look at the rats and the roaches around you, and think that you have failed until you hear this. GBU, God bless you. Because there's a POW on the other side of your wall that knows you've been tortured. And GBU didn't just mean literal. It didn't just mean, may God bless you. It meant we understand what you're going through. We've been there, and we are with you. So through communication, these POWs managed to survive. They managed to maintain their honor. They came up with their own definition of honor, their own set of rules to fit their bizarre circumstance. And it was guys like Jeremiah Denton and Jim Stockdale that organized the POWs. And eventually the North Vietnamese figured this out. And they figured that there were about 11 POWs out of 500 who they had to get rid of, because these 11 POWs were so obnoxious, so uncooperative, and so subversive, they were ruining the North Vietnamese's entire propaganda program. So the other thing Defiant will tell you, the book, is how to get kicked out of a POW camp. So they took these 11 guys and kicked them out of the Hanoi Hilton. They sent them to a place that was even worse. They nicknamed it Alcatraz. And in that place were Admiral Denton and Admiral Stockdale, future Admiral Bob Shoemaker, Texas Congressman Sam Johnson, who actually shares grandchildren with Commander Jim Mulligan, who was also one of these 11. 2 POWs who actually escaped. They got 15 miles before they got caught, and that is one of the most extraordinary side stories in the whole book. I almost could have written a book just about George McKnight and George Coker's escape. George Coker, by the way, was 23 years old when he got shot down, 24 years old when he tried to escape. He was a former state wrestling champ from New Jersey. Anybody from New Jersey? So you can imagine what a 5'6" New Jersey state wrestling champion was like in a POW camp. And I'm surprised the North Vietnamese didn't just let him go. But these 11 guys were put in Alcatraz. And they thought, when they realized that they were the guys in there, they thought that we're really going to get it now. They're really going to tear us up. Well, they didn't. They did something that was almost worse. They just left them there. And they left them in solitary cells that were 9 feet long by 4 feet wide. It's about this wide. 2, 3. 23 hours and 50 minutes a day. There are no windows. It's a refrigerator during the winter. It's a furnace during the summertime. So these guys came up with an amazing set of games they would play with themselves. They would spend time building houses. They would spend time working quadratic equations just to keep themselves from going nuts. Day after day, never knowing when or if that sentence to that tiny little cell was ever going to end. You know, and for a while it got so bad, the isolation was so terrible that they almost wished they'd go see Pig Eye. They almost wished somebody would just beat them, just so they'd have something different to do, so they'd have some interaction with somebody. And in 1969, they got their wish, and you can read about the Blue Book Purge of 1969. These 11 guys, these 11 reprobates, might have stayed in Alcatraz for an indefinite amount of years. They might have stayed in Hanoi for an unknown number of years, were it not for their wives. This flag, the POW-MIA flag, is a symbol of one of the most extraordinary women's movements in American history, and nobody knows it. I had no idea. Basically, back home, there's another battle that was going on. So I want you to imagine for a second that you're Admiral Denton's wife, Jane. You're a Southern belle from Mobile, Alabama, and you have 7 kids at home. You get a knock at the front door. A Navy captain, his wife, and your priest are on your doorstep. And they say, Don't worry, Jane. We think your husband's alive. We're not sure, but we think he is. North Vietnam's not telling us who's captured or who's dead. But we need you to be quiet. We need you not to say anything about this. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anybody else, because anything you say could endanger your husband. So we need you to keep quiet. And we'll take care of it. And you're a wife, you're a military spouse, 1965, so you know what? You're going to do what the captain says. So for a couple years, you trust that the government is going to get your husband home. The government's going to make sure he's being well treated. After about 2 or 3 years, through some ingenious communication, another great part of the book, some ingenious communication, you learn your husband's in leg irons. North Vietnamese are experts in torture. He's almost starved. He's in terrible condition. And the government's doing nothing about it. So women like Jane Denton, Sybil Stockdale, and Louise Mulligan, who are all 3 wives of this Alcatraz 11 group, they mobilized women whose husbands were POWs or MIAs all across America, and they created the POW MIA movement. Did anyone here have a POW MIA bracelet they ever wore? 6 million of those made. And people as diverse as Bob Hope and Cher and Richard Nixon wore these things. And for the first time, Americans came together around the men fighting the war in Vietnam, because the war had been so divisive that there's actually a need to remind people that, hey, whatever your opinions are about the war itself, remember that we need to honor, respect, and bring home the men that are fighting it. So through all their advocacy, through all their efforts, finally, in 1973, the POWs came home. There's a wonderful photograph in the book of Admiral Denton and his wife Jane in a car at Naval Station Norfolk about 5 minutes after he's landed. And I'm getting chill bumps talking about it. You have never seen 2 people so happy to see each other. You know, in all of America, in February and March of 1973, all of America came together and celebrated these POWs coming home, because the Vietnam War never really had a particular end. It just kind of went away. It just faded away. We withdrew. There's never really an ending to the war. The POWs coming home was an ending to the war. And the POWs felt so grateful, so happy to have this outpouring. But then they realized that most veterans coming back from Vietnam never received that kind of reception. And every veteran coming back from Vietnam deserved that kind of reception. So, on behalf of my generation, I want to tell each one of you how much we appreciate what you did in Vietnam, or wherever you were during that conflict. We want to welcome you home, and our challenge as a rising generation is to live up to the same kind of values and the same example that you set for us. So thank you all very much for that. It's been a pleasure to be with you today, and I think we're going to have some questions here in a second. Okay.
Questions for Alvin, please. Raise your hand. Yep, Herb.
I ran across a story on the internet the other day about a guy, a sailor got blown off the Canberra and taken a prisoner in North Vietnam. And he was supposed to be the dumbest POW.
Doug Hegdal. He was supposed to be the dumbest, and he was the youngest. 19 years old. He looked about 16. And I think he went up on deck one night for a smoke on this cruiser out in the Gulf of Tonkin, and either a gun went off or the cruiser turned. Over he went. So when he got to Hanoi, the North Vietnamese thought, surely this is a CIA guy. There's no way somebody's going to fall off a ship and end up in a POW camp. You Air Force and Army guys can talk to your Navy friends about this story. And so they thought he was CIA until they realized, or at least as far as they thought, that he was an idiot. Because he basically played a stooge. And the American leadership realized that they actually might send him home as a gesture of goodwill. Because again, he was an 18-year-old kid. And so the American leadership had Doug Hegdel memorize the name of every POW. So when he actually got released early, he was the only prisoner to go home early that was sanctioned by the POW leadership. He had over 300 names memorized to the tune of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And he couldn't say it any other way, and he said it so fast that they took 3 days to actually debrief him and get the names done. But an incredible story, incredible story. Anyone else?
As an Army aviator, I was there in '68, and Jane Fonda was up there. Was she ever mentioned in the book?
She's been mentioned in every talk I've given. I always get that question. Jane Fonda made a little visit to Hanoi that got a lot of press and earned her not a lot of favor with the POWs or anybody else in the military community. But she never had any interaction with the 11 guys I wrote about. So there were so many things I could have written about that were outside of their experience. I just didn't write about it because it wasn't really germane to what they went through. And again, there's so much you can write about with Vietnam and the POW experience. I really tried to keep it focused so you see the experience through their eyes. But I can certainly tell you what they think of her.
Did the guys there know about her visit?
Most of the guys there did not really know exactly about her visit. They heard various versions of it.
Okay.
Sir?
Alvin, the material that you've gathered is so vivid and real. I've been one of the lucky ones to read your book already.
Thank you.
How was it for you emotionally, because I know it affected you, with collecting this material and how you put it together?
Okay, a couple things. The POWs in that book, I feel like they're my grandparents now. And I never thought I'd have friends that are 80-year-old POWs, former POWs, but I do. And I love these guys. And so, part of my mission and part of my passion for talking about this book, I don't want to sell a book to make a buck. I want to sell a book because everybody in America needs to understand what our Vietnam veterans went through and what these 11 guys went through. And so, being with them and talking with them, it was incredibly emotional for them. And I was really fortunate they trusted me enough to open up the way they did. And there's 6 of the 11 that are still with us. And for me, I think it was more emotional at the beginning because at some point I just kind of had to put down a wall and try and analytically tell the story so that people would understand really what they went through without making it too overwhelming. But I'll tell you, right in the last chapter of that book, it was a long time before I could write it, think about it, or edit it with dry eyes. It was really very emotional, and just knowing the men, particularly knowing what they went through and knowing the way they went through it, it was tough to write about. But I'm really convinced that there's never been a group of men and women that have suffered more for longer than the folks in Defiant. Maureen.
Thank you. Can you get your book on the Kindle?
The book sales question. You can get my book anywhere books are available. So you can get it on Kindle, iBooks, it's on audiobooks, hardback, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble stores, wherever you want to go. And look, I'd really encourage you to get it. You can look at the reviews. People are just moved by this story. And I think I did a decent job writing it, but the story is what's so amazing. And I really want to use this book as one more way to welcome home, all the veterans that served during Vietnam. So I'll stick around. I'll sign some books later, and feel free to come up and we'll talk a little bit more.
All right, I have one last quiz for today, and I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to ask you not to respond, and then I'll tell you how to respond. And Alvin will be the person who will confirm the answer. And if you get the answer right, I will buy you a new book today on behalf of the association. So the question is, how many POWs were there in the Vietnam War? Do not answer. First person that stands up gets it. So you have to stand up to get the answer. Yes, sir. Nope.
He's asking a very tough question. There are 80 different ways to measure this.
Okay.
It's very complicated.
What about
Right answer. Right answer.
All right, that's good. All right. And thank you very much, guys. So anyway, you pick your book up back there. We're really glad to have you guys. I want to, Alvin, thank you very, very much. And on behalf of don't leave. Hang on, guys. Thank you. And on behalf of the Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association, and your father-in-law will explain the value of this. As you're probably aware, this is our Vietnam Service Medal that we've actually made into a paperweight, and it's inscribed with our association name on the back. We only give this to special people, and particularly to you, this is a real honor to have you here. You do a great honor for us, and particularly for all of our friends who were POWs and survived all that. Thank you so much. And I hope you, again, thank you, will come. And I understand he's going to be at the Atlanta History Center again, am I right?
Saturday Memorial Day.
Saturday Memorial Day. So if you know anybody that missed it and want to go meet him again, you'll be there as well. Alvin, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.